2020 marks 10 years since the Volkswagen Amarok first appeared at dealerships in Australia. That's a very long time in automotive terms, and it gives the Amarok some of the oldest bones in its segment. Does the Amarok's age blunt its credentials to the 2020 ute buyer? Yes and no. There's a fair few things to run through to get to the answer of that question, and that's what we're here to do today. We're going to run through this Amarok off-road, we're going to run through it on-road as well. We're going to go through the interior, second row, the tub, just about everything you need to know about this Amarok if you're looking to buy one for yourself. We've got the limited edition Amarok Canyon V6 on test. It goes for $57,990, which slots in between Sportline and Highline models in the range. This Canyon specification does get a few goodies on the outside to run through. There's bi-xenon headlights up front there, some black flares, black side steps, and these special 17-inch alloy wheels, and they've got a bit of a machined finish on them. From the back, there's also a black rear bumper and some smoked out tail lights. And of course, there's Canyon decals. Now, I don't know about you, but in this color specification, I'm seeing a fair bit of Ranger Wild Track. What's familiar is what lies under the bonnet. A 3-litre turbo diesel V6 that makes 165 kilowatts and 550 newton meters. There's also an overboost function that bumps that power up to 180 kilowatts for short periods, and all the while sipping 9 litres per 100 kilometres. An 8-speed automatic gearbox means there's no low-range transfer case in this Amarok. But even though it's not there, don't think this isn't a good off-roader, because it is pretty accomplished. Instead of using low-range gearing, it relies a bit more on electronics in the chassis. A traction control system that is quite good. You can take on some pretty hard tracks in this car and it figures out what it's doing. You've also got a locking rear differential and a limited slip center diff. That's not locking, but it still does a decent job off-road. The Amarok is, however, a bit light on for ground clearance, under 200 mils according to the spec sheet, and the side steps on this Canyon do sit down low compared to the sills, so if you are going to be doing a bit of off-roading, even though there is decent protection underneath there, you'd want a suspension lift to really make this better off-road. Those 17-inch alloys are wrapped in 245/65 R17 Continental tyres. They're a decent all-terrain tyre that are quiet and comfortable on-road, but prove to be decent off-road as well in our testing. Personally, I prefer my four-wheel drives with a low-range transfer case, and even though this Amarok is good off-road, it would be better with one equipped. One option would be to get a manual Amarok, and that's got a low-range transfer case with the 6-speed manual, and the V6 option of that is coming very soon. One advantage this automatic Amarok does have, however, is permanent all-wheel drive. That's different to most other utes in the segment, and it's good for off-road, especially high-speed dirt, but it does have a few other benefits. And that's on-road. Because all four wheels are driven in this Amarok, it's got a lot more composure than other utes, even though it's got more power and more torque than most of the competition. It's not single pegging, the traction control's not cutting in on low traction surfaces, and it just feels a lot more safe on the road. It's also got a lot more grip in corners as well. It's not a sports car, but for a ute, this is probably the closest thing you're going to get to one. That 8-speed gearbox is a bit of a peach around town as well. A lot of the gear changes you barely notice, but if you're asking a lot more of this engine, it drops gears nice and quick, gives you the revs you need, and does it without fuss, and that's what I really like about this car. The ride is mostly really good around town. There is a bit of firmness there, which is typical for a dual cab ute, but you have to remember this does have a big payload, so you do need to expect a bit of firmness. It steers nicely, it holds the road well, so despite being one of the oldest utes in its segment, the Amarok is still one of the best in its class in terms of ride and handling. The biggest shortcomings to this Amarok are the same monkeys that have been on the brand's back for many years now. The Amarok is still lacking airbags in the second row and is missing some more advanced safety tech. Most notably is autonomous emergency braking, but there's also lane departure warning, blind spot monitoring, forward collision warning and active cruise control missing from this Amarok Canyon. And while there is a 5-star ANCAP safety rating, it was gained many years ago and isn't a fair comparison between other, more recent crash tests. The interior actually overall, despite the age of the Amarok, is still quite good. These seats are unique to Canyon specification. They've got some different stitching around the place, different materials, but they're mostly cloth and manual adjustment. For my money, very comfortable, supportive in all the right places. This infotainment unit, 6.33 inches, is probably on the small side these days, although it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto capability. No digital radio and no native navigation, however. In terms of practicality overall, This center console looks big, but it's not. That's mostly handbrake there. You've got room for a few things in there, but this space up here I found quite handy whilst driving around to throw things in. You've also got this spot up here, decent sized door cards as well. There's 4 12-volt plugs around the place. One up here, 2 here, one's actually a cigarette lighter too, and one at the back. And there's only one USB point, which is probably a little bit of a letdown these days. And while there is a reversing camera for this Amarok Canyon, it's worth noting that it's not the best one we've used. It's lacking in a bit of visibility and clarity. In the back of the Amarok here, there is a couple of party tricks to point out. These seat bases do fold up, which could be handy, although there isn't any storage hiding under there. Same for the backs here as well. There's a jack hidden in there, but there's no real extra storage. Hopping into the Amarok, you'll see that it's decently spacious for a dual cab ute. It's not spacious overall, but a little bit of legroom there, a little bit of headroom, and it's a little bit wider than most other dual cabs as well. So shoulder room, even if you had 3 on board, is doable. Maybe not for longer trips, but you might get away with it. In terms of storage, slots on the back of the seat here, they're nice. The door cards are a decent size as well. They're lined, but you can actually fit a large bottle in, which is a nice addition. One 12-volt plug, however, and no air vents. You do get 2 cup holders, but they're down here on the transmission tunnel. A little bit of a dicky position in my opinion. I don't think it would work that well. To the business end of the ute. First thing to point out, this Amarok does have a lockable tailgate. Not all utes have that, and it's a handy feature. Volkswagen will also tell us that this is the widest tray in its class. You can actually fit a full-size pallet in the back there. I'm not sure how many people actually fit pallets to tubs. They normally do that to trays, but anyway, it shows you that this is a good size tray. There's 4 tie-down points there, very sturdy looking, not completely in the corners, but I think they're in handy locations if you're going to load this thing up with gear and you need to tie it down. One 12-volt plug, and another thing to point out, that brake light up the back doubles as a work light as well, which you can operate from inside the cabin, and that's going to be a handy thing if you're doing something in the tub at night. I did notice there's a couple of drain holes right up the front end, and that's actually a really handy feature. Water doesn't pool in there if it's raining or if you're hosing this thing out after a hard day's work. Speaking of hard work, this Amarok is missing a tub liner, and that's a bit of a bad feature. This paint scratches really easily for work or play. One caveat to note with this Canyon Special Edition is that it is only limited to 350 units. Yes, the Amarok is an oldie and it's getting towards the end of its life, but it's still a goodie. There's a few things that it really excels in these days. Number one is that engine. 550 Newton meters, it's powerful, but it's smooth. It's got an 8-speed automatic gearbox and permanent all-wheel drive, which makes it one of the best utes on road by a fair margin. However, the biggest weakness of this Amarok is safety. It's missing features that the competition has standard, and it's just not good enough, especially considering this is 2020 and 4x4 utes are now family cars. If your number one priority is on-road handling, performance and dynamics, despite its age, this V6 Amarok is still at the top of the pack. Is this the peak of the V6 Amarok range? Let us know in the comments below. And go to Drive.com.au for more reviews and news. Bit of an old trap for young players that we've been caught out on today, and that's the number plate. On this test Amarok we have here, the number plate was only secured with 2 screws into the plastic behind, and that's not a lot holding it on. When you're going through water crossings, water can get up behind, and we found out today that it doesn't take a lot of force for that to come off.